WTIM.
Good morning. You're listening to WTIM, your information station, and our morning show brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Grayson Bauman. Joining us in this segment is Illinois State Senator Steve McClure. He's back around with us here this month. Good morning to you, Steve. How are you doing?
No, Grayson, good to be with you.
Well, thank you for stopping by and filling us in on everything state of Illinois wise. And one of those big topics that we'd like to start with here today is we're running out of time. And last month we talked about how that time was going to come quickly, and it's nearly here. We're 2 weeks away from session being closed and a budget still not resolved and decided on. What can you tell me on that front there?
Well, the budget is, I would say, more contentious this year than any other year since I've been elected into the state Senate. We have the Democrat caucus in the House is having a lot of disagreements among themselves. And there was a House member who crafted their own budget and did not even file that budget as a bill. And the Speaker of the House expelled that state representative from the Democrat caucus. And I've never heard of anything like that before. So that just shows you how intense this is right now and how many internal fights there are. And so that's one extreme. Another thing that's been occurring is that the Democrats have proposed $6 billion in new taxes. And it appears as though every single proposal that I've seen, even for bills unrelated to the budget, that are major topics, the governor has been tacking on taxes and fees and things like that into the legislation. So it's everybody's trying to figure out how to pay for the budget because the governor, as he has for the last several years, has proposed yet again the biggest budget in the history of our state. And at some point, the governor has to realize that you can't, you need to make tough decisions. And when those tough decisions are made, that should be what goes into these negotiations. Unfortunately, he's not making tough decisions, and he wants to keep making these extravagant budgets. And he wants, the hardworking taxpayers who are already overtaxed way too much in our state. He wants them to pay for it, and to me, that's unacceptable.
Well, and to hear that there's really not been a whole lot of headway made on it as of the last month that we spoke about it, that doesn't seem to be a real great sign of where we're headed with this. Do you see any common ground or the ability to reach it right now between the two parties, the sides of the aisles, or right now are we kind of in limbo?
Well, we're still in the period where our caucus, the Republican Senate caucus, is still trying to reach out and trying to become involved in the negotiations. And so, a lot of times what happens with these budgets is that they're crafted, very late in the evening, very early in the morning on the final few days of session. And so we don't know if we're going to be able to make some significant adjustments or not. If the past is any guide, we probably will not be able to, but we don't want to take that off the table. We want to actively negotiate. So, we're at the table right now, and we want to work with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to craft a responsible budget that does not overburden our taxpayers with new taxes, and that does not, by the way, keep funding free health care for non-citizens and things like that. So we want to be involved, and we're ready to work, and we're actively keeping in contact with our Democratic colleagues and engaging in meetings and things like that. But at the end of the day, we'll see if we are allowed to have any significant say in the budget. And that is yet to be seen at the moment.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, by what history might tell us, it might be a tough waters to tread there. In terms of something you mentioned there, the lawmaker that was thrown out for creating a budget, not a bill. You said you'd never seen anything like this before, kind of unprecedented. Can you take us down that path? Why maybe the Speaker of the House saw it as a problem, or just kind of explain that situation a little bit for those that might not understand?
Well, obviously the Speaker of the House is the leader of the Democratic caucus, in the House. And, I'm not involved in those internal meetings that they have. I mean, one thing that each uh, chamber, each caucus, those meetings that each caucus has are always confidential. So, when I go into the Senate Republican caucus and we have myself and the other 18 Republican senators, we are sort of sworn to secrecy there. It's staff, and it is, like I said, Republican legislators. And so I don't know what happens in the Democratic caucus when they go caucus in the House. And the reason why these meetings should always be confidential is because we have to be able to speak freely and throw out ideas and things like that. If you think everything you say in caucus is going to be, put on the record or something, then you're going to hold stuff back, which is not really helpful for the caucus itself. So apparently, the speaker wants to have full control over any budget proposals and any negotiations on the budget. And a state representative decided to take things into their own hands, and the speaker was not pleased by that. But it's one thing to take somebody off of a committee assignment or something like that, to say, okay, well, I'm going to make sure you're not on this committee anymore. But to expel them from the caucus, to kick them out of the Democratic caucus in the House, is quite a move. And that's typically only reserved for, really bad stuff. Someone commits a crime or something like that. So just because they disagreed about the budget, to get somebody kicked out of the caucus is really unprecedented.
Shows you a little bit of what you're dealing with on the other side of that, if that's going on within party lines as well. When it comes to the $6 billion tax proposal, where does the state of Illinois even plan to find that money? Obviously, it's more than likely in our pockets, but do you know roughly where they're planning to come up with that $6 billion number?
Well, it's really taxes on businesses and, fees here and there. I mean, it's kind of spread out. And I'll give you a good example of kind of what we're seeing right now. The governor, during his State of the State address, talked about PBM reform, and that's reforms for pharmacy benefit managers. And what's happening right now is, these PBMs are not fully reimbursing independent pharmacists, for example. When the independent pharmacist fulfills a prescription, the PBM should be at least giving them enough to pay for that prescription, but they're not. They're giving them, in some cases, less money. So we've got these independent pharmacies across the state. I've got a lot in my district who are getting reimbursed at less than cost, which is ridiculous, even though the person who has the prescription insurance is, fully paying into their insurance, and they should be reimbursing these people at full cost. So it's kind of a scheme that really needs to be addressed. Well, Governor Pritzker's proposal right now has it so that, these PBMs have to pay $15 of taxes, new taxes, per prescription. Well, that doesn't help the independent pharmacist, because it doesn't go to the independent pharmacist. And all that does is going to cause the average person to have to pay more money for their prescription drugs to get filled. So it's just a $15 tax that the governor is going to use to try to, fill the state piggy bank, because he can't, as he said in the State of the Union or the State of the State address, he wants to tighten the belt. Well, the governor's having a real hard time tightening the belt. So just stuff like that, just random like taxes and fees on bills that have no business increasing taxes or fees. I mean, I support PBM reforms without question, but I don't support new taxes that are going to cause people to have to pay more money for their prescriptions. So, that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. But you've got a governor who doesn't understand the real world, doesn't understand having to pay bills, inherited a massive amount of money, and you're seeing what he hasn't learned about finances in our budgets every year. It's crazy.
Well, and it's coming to life a little bit there, and then you think about, all right, who's that going to actually get passed down to? Who's that tax going to get passed down to? It's likely not going to be with those independent pharmacies or those in charge of them. So it'll just be another interesting piece to see how we plan to come up with $6 billion. I don't know. I'm interested to find out, because it doesn't seem all that possible. But right now, joining us by phone is Illinois State Senator Steve McClure. He's joining us here on the morning show, brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, in Landmark of Taylorville. And we're going to take our first break. We'll be right back around in just a few moments, and we'll talk more about the state of the state. You're listening to WTIM, your information station.
WTIM. The big Sandy's rising, sound the alarm.
On the heels of deadly floods, eastern Kentucky and West Virginia are left devastated. Lives have been lost, homes and businesses swept away, and families are struggling to survive. But in the face of unimaginable loss, there's a way to help. Pike County Flood Relief is there, providing hope where it's needed most. Your tax-deductible donation can help deliver food, shelter, and the support needed to rebuild lives. These families have lost everything, but with your help, they can heal. Go to PikeCountyFloodRelief.org right now to make your donation. Every dollar helps. Every act of kindness counts. Together, we can heal the heart of these communities. Pike County Flood Relief. In their darkest hour, your light can make all the difference.
God deliver us.
I'm Will Perkins, President and CEO of the Taylorville Community Credit Union. TCCU is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the Miller Media Group Community Spotlight, allowing a different nonprofit organization to be highlighted on WTIM, WMKR, and WRAN each month.
I am Terry Baker, Chairman of the Lincoln Prairie Trails Conservancy, a 501c3 founded to repair, maintain, promote, enhance, and expand the Lincoln Prairie Trail. Partnering with the communities of Taylorville, Pana, and Awanaco, nonprofits, donors, and non-governmental groups, we have been able to make many enhancements and repairs. Find us on the web at LincolnPrairieTrailsConservancy.com and Facebook at Lincoln Prairie Trails Conservancy. We hope to see you on the trail.
This is Cammie Payne, General Manager of the Miller Media Group. We, along with TCCU, are proud to bring you the Community Spotlight each month.
TCCU is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the Miller Media Group Community Spotlight. Come join us. You'll wonder why you waited. Member NCUA.
Getting an education not only provides knowledge and skills, but along the way it helps the student develop resilience, critical thinking, and the ability to solve problems. These are the skills that shape leaders and innovators. Today, we salute the class of 2025 and encourage them to keep learning and growing, to tackle life with curiosity and courage. Congratulations to you, the class of 2025.
Josh Reams State Farm in Nokomis, wishing much success to Nokomis class of 2025 and all area graduates.
Pastor Brian Moore here from Locust Grove Church near Assumption. We are alive and so worth the drive. Find directions to our church and watch our video podcast by clicking our icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
With over 8 hours a day of agriculture programming weekdays and 2 hours on Saturdays, WTIM AM, FM, and online is your ag information station. Listen by tuning in on air or online and listen to WTIM Ag podcasts anytime.
WTIM.
And we're back with the WTIM morning show here on your information station, brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, as well as Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Grayson Bauman. Back around joining us here is Illinois State Senator Steve McClure. Steve and I have been talking about the last 2 weeks of the session here with the budget and everything concerning that. And Steve, I know there's a couple more pieces that you want to throw out there with the budget. What additionally can you tell us about it?
Well, it's been revealed over the last few weeks that there's a $1 billion shortfall. So the governor's making his big proposal, and with the revenues coming in and the money that the state has already, he's $1 billion short. And I think the average person would say, okay, then we need to make some changes and ensure that we can make up for that gap. Instead, the governor's saying, no, we're not going to spend any less. He just wants to tax us even more than we're already taxed. We've already got the highest property taxes in the country. We've got taxes on so many things that it's hard to even keep track of these things at this point. So I just think that just demonstrates that the governor just does not have any clue about financing or about the average person who has to pay their bills every day and try to, feed their family and pay for their health insurance and things like that. So that's kind of what we're dealing with, and we will see how this all unfolds over the next 2 weeks.
Well, and I'm sure life is a whole lot easier with a couple of billions in your bank account.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. Same here. And I think I don't want to speak for you, but for myself, I think I'll be only imagining moving forward. There was another thing that concerns me a little bit that you brought to my attention. It was with the director of the Department of Corrections, some things that she has been doing, and there is a call for her resignation. Is there anything that you'd like to let listeners know about there?
Sure. So I serve on the Executive Appointments Committee, and we did have the director of the Department of Corrections testify before the committee a few days ago, last week. And essentially what's been happening is we have a record number of attacks on prison guards. We've got a record number of drugs that are being smuggled into our prisons right now. We also have a really bizarre issue that involves the release of inmates well before their sentences are set to expire. And, I have to tell you that the Christian County State's Attorney, John McWard, is one of the state's attorneys who has reached out to me on a consistent basis and texted me about cases where, somebody was sentenced, for 14 years for dealing drugs and with a gun, by the way, with a weapon. So they were charged with unlawful possession of a weapon by a felon, for being in possession of a gun, and dealing meth, for example. This is in Christian County. And they were supposed to serve a significant sentence, and they only served a couple of years. And so I talked to the director of DOC, and I said, what the heck is going on here? And I was provided with several cases I asked about, because obviously I represent 10 counties, not just Christian County, but I had quite a few cases I asked about. And so they showed me kind of that they get credit for taking classes and things like that. And they reduced their sentences by like 80% or 90%. I'm thinking, okay, well, let me see these classes. Well, in some of the cases, like one example, the inmate took the same class 7 times. And all of us that have gone to high school or college, you take one class and you get credit for that. If you take the same class again, you don't get the same credit again and then again and again. It's like totally defeating the purpose of trying to, get people an education. And it's instead of it just seems to be filling a box to excuse people so they can leave prison earlier. And so one of the cases that I ended with in the committee hearing was I said, here's a case where the person was sentenced to 80 years for murder, and murder sentences are to be served at 100% of the sentence. So some sentences, you're sentenced to 10 years and you get credit for every day that you serve. So you serve 50% of the sentence because you serve one day and you get credit for another day. Well, murder doesn't work like that. Murder, you serve your entire sentence. And DOC had an internal memo that I read in the committee that says that if this inmate is serving a sentence for murder, then they are not eligible to get any time off of their sentence by taking any of these classes. And then I found out, which I read to the director, that someone who was sentenced 80 years for murder was released after 30 years. They didn't even serve 50% of their sentence. And the director's response to that was, they'll get back to me.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. That's the type
I'm
of
sure
stuff.
I will never hear from them again, is what I'm sure of.
I am sure too. Well, Steve, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and that typically happens to us here on the WTIM Morning Show. But thank you so much for joining us month in and month out. I do appreciate it on this end.
Of course. Always great to speak with you.
Well, Steve McClure, Illinois State Senator, joining us here on the WTIM Morning Show. We'll be back around with more of it when we come back. You're listening to WTIM, your information station.
WTIM.
The Big 870 WTIM Assumption Taylorville. 96.1 FM Taylorville. 107.5 FM Shelbyville. 107.9 FM Pena